What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. I'm going to continue to examine 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. I wanted to take a look at Randy Turpin. His name was Rudolph Turpin. He was born in Leamington, England, June 7, 1928. He stood 5 foot 10 inches. He was a middleweight and light heavyweight. He was managed by George Middleton. Now, Randy Turpin won 5 British amateur titles. He would begin his professional debut on the night of September 17, 1946, and he would score a first-round knockout over Gordon Griffith. November 19, 1946, he would take on Des Jones in London, England, and he would score a 6-round victory that evening. December 26, 1946, he would KO Bill Blinding and Brimington, knocking him out in 1 round. And he would continue with this impressive record, continuing his knockout streak all through 1947. 1948, he would take on Freddie Price, January 26, by knocking him out in 1 round. 1949, he would have several fights. He would lose 1 fight on a foul in 4 rounds, May 3rd, 1949. But he would make an impressive comeback by knocking out the rest of his opponents the remainder of that year. Gene Wange, Roy Walters, and Pete Meade, all knockout victims of Randy Turpin. 1950, January 31st to be exact, he would take on Gilbert Stock in London, England. He would defeat him in 8 rounds. March 6, 1950, he would take on Richard Armash in London, England, and he would knock him out in 6 rounds. But October 17, 1950, he would take on Albert Fitch in London, England. He would knock him out in 5 rounds, and he would earn the British middleweight title. And that was an impressive feat. Randy Turpin had 5 brothers. It was a total of 5 of them. He had 4 brothers. And he had a brother who was, in my opinion, he was better than Randy Turpin. And Randy Turpin just got a good break. He got an opportunity on 2 separate occasions, once against Ray Robinson and once against Carl Bobo Olsen. But his brother's name was Dick Turpin. And he had, I believe, a more impressive career. He just didn't win a world title. But he did win universal titles. So February 27th, Randy Turpin will win a vacant European middleweight championship title by defeating Luke Van Dam in London. Knocked him out in 1 round. July 10th, 1951, he would get his shot against the great Ray Robinson in London. And he would defeat him in 15 rounds, and he would become the brand new world middleweight champion. It seems like Randy Turpin was the 7th fight on Ray Robinson's European tour. But he would hit gold, getting a very good payday in a return go at New York's Polo Ground, September 12th, 1951. He'd be stopped in 10 rounds, but he would defend his dignity by going over and facing Ray Robinson in his hometown. He'd be stopped in 10 rounds. Referee Ruby Goldstein would tell Randy Turpin, "You had enough." And Ray Robinson would once again become the brand new middleweight champion of the world. Now, in 1953, as a matter of fact, 1952, Randy Turpin would take on Don Cockle, June 10th, and he would stop in 11th rounds and win the British Empire light heavyweight championship title. October 21st, 1952, he would take on George Angelo, London, England. He'd defeat him in 15 rounds, and he would win the vacant British Empire middleweight title. He would now hold the European light heavyweight and the British Empire middleweight title simultaneously. June 9th, 1953, he would take on Charlie Holmes, London, England. He would defeat him in 15 rounds. and it would be for the European middleweight title. And that would get him an opportunity to face Hawaii's Carl Bobo Olsen, October 21st, 1953, in New York. He would lose 15 rounds. It was for the vacant World Middleweight Championship title. Now, Charlie Holmes and Randy Turpin were scheduled to meet to unify the European titles, as Carl Bobo Olsen and Patty Young were scheduled to meet for the America's Middleweight Championship belt. And those belts were supposed to be unified into a World Middleweight Championship title. And that was for Ray Robinson's vacant title because he retired in 1952 after he would lose to Joey Maxim in New York's Yankee Stadium. Couldn't answer the 14th round bell. And that's because of the heat got to Ray Robinson. He was moving around a little too much early in the round. He was fighting a bigger man. And he was trying to punch him as though he was punching a middleweight. But he was punching a light heavyweight. So he got exhausted and couldn't continue the fight. Had he defeated Joey Maxim, he would have become the World Light Heavyweight Champion. And then he would have challenged Davy Sands, the Australian Light Heavyweight Champion. They would have unified that title. That would have been one of the biggest paydays of Ray Robinson's career. So in 1957, Randy Turpin would take on Arthur Howard, June 11th to be exact. And he would defeat him in 15 rounds for the British Light Heavyweight Championship belt. Randy Turpin, what a fighter. He earns a spot on the list. 100 years. The greatest 150 black fighters of all time. Shout out to Randy Turpin. Shame how he passed away. They say he committed suicide. I hear other stories. But Randy Turpin, don't let nobody kid you, was a fighter. When Ray Robinson would be giving a farewell celebration party in New York's Madison Square Garden, 1965, Randy Turpin would be there to greet him. He had so much respect for Ray Robinson, and those two would embrace each other better than any of the other middleweights that were in that ring. You had Carmen Basilio, Gene Foreman, you had Carl Bobo Olsen, and Randy Turpin. Thanks for listening. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. 100 years of the greatest 150 greatest black fighters of all time. On behalf of Curtis Anderson and myself, Scrapbook Boxing, we say farewell.